raise a family. They have some of the same opportunities that me and my wife.
You agreed that we need to see them as a terrorist organization.
On a private cloud server, yes or no?
To love country, to love God, and to try to do the right thing.
Worked for the nation and the interests of the people.
Welcome to the Fresh Freedom Podcast. This is a podcast with freedom-loving freshman members of the House of Representatives, where we will provide you a behind-the-scenes look at what's happening in Congress. I'm joined by my fellow conservative freshman members, Josh Burkeen from Oklahoma, but today we have a special guest, Congressman Thomas Massie from Kentucky. Thomas is a legend and a certified genius. In 1992, he won MIT's 2.70 design competition. He came to Congress in the Tea Party movement, and he has made a name for himself by being a fearless fighter for American liberties. Thomas, it's an honor to have you on the show.
Well, it's an honor to be here with two Jim Jordan acolytes. I can see you're channeling him because you're not wearing the jacket, but you both have white shirts and ties on.
It was sitting close to him on the floor a while ago. It just rubbed it just happened. We didn't even realize it.
The costume isn't complete without a yellow tie. Just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, I even got the tie, the Adam Smith tie. So we went through quite the last 3 weeks. It's been crazy. I was just in a Bible study, and the pastor that was leading it said, "Have you guys felt anxiety the last few weeks?" And I thought, absolutely.
But most of that anxiety was due to the fact we're stuck with other Republicans in meetings for 2-3 weeks.
Yes.
That causes the anxiety. But for me, I've been through, actually I was part of 3 coups to take out John Boehner and architected the second, 2 of those coups.
Wow.
One I ran with another guy from Oklahoma, Jim Bridenstine, and then the other one I ran with Mark Meadows. He drafted a motion to vacate, and I was basically his legislative director, and I was like, we got to rewrite this whole thing, Mark. So, I've been through it before, wasn't too anxious about it. I never voted for Paul Ryan. Like after we got rid of John Boehner, we had Paul Ryan. Which, frankly, he started out trying to fix things, but he just wasn't up to the task, and things got worse. And then we reelected Paul Ryan, much to my chagrin. I was the only Republican who didn't vote for Paul Ryan when he was elected to Speaker.
On the floor?
On the floor, yeah.
Wow.
So this is par for the course for me. I mean, it's more unusual that it's quiet,
Yeah. It's been quite a week. And I think the end result is good. Yeah. I think Mike Johnson is going to be I think he's a great person. He's got a servant's heart. He's a godly Christian man. There's no one that can probably say a bad word or bad thing about Mike Johnson.
Yeah, it's like we ran an algorithm and tried to find the Republican we all hate the least, and it produced Mike Johnson. I think he's got about 30 to 90 days before we all get stabby again.
Before we get stabby.
Yes. I mean, that's what we witnessed, right? The reason it took so long to get a speaker was it was like one murder-suicide after another, or maybe just murder. I felt like this, one speaker candidate was like, well, if I can't have it, he's not going to have it. And the next one did that. The next one did that.
But don't you think, look, you know this. Most people up here, they vote for speakers often, and you don't fall into that because you have courage and you have principles and conviction that guide you. And your voting record and what even you've talked about demonstrates that. Shout out to Jim Bridenstine from Oklahoma. He also had that same reputation. Mark Meadows. But what happened on the floor that last night, where you saw people, really ingratiated with the concept of Mike Johnson, to what you said, because he is respected for having a deep rudder. He's respected, I think no one's going to always agree with all of our votes, but don't you think that's going to maybe give him some extra latitude just because people respect him as a decent human being?
Yeah, he's got principles, very strong principles. You're not going to move him off of that. The challenge that he has is he hasn't been in leadership.
Yeah.
And he's like the three of us. He's got like a dozen staff working for him.
Yeah.
And he needs about, 4 dozen
Yeah.
staff to do the speaker's job. So where's he going to get those staff? You're going to
hopefully
go on
that's
LinkedIn.
key.
You're going to go on LinkedIn and try to
Yeah.
find some leadership staff. What's going to happen is
ZipRecruiter.
yeah. Well, some of the people who work for McCarthy, they're just kind of burned out and done with the whole thing, and they'll leave. Some may stick around to help with the transition, but I think they've been polishing their resumes.
Yeah.
And there'll be members here who try to get their staff hired by Mike Johnson so that they could have some
More influence, yeah.
Oh, really?
influence.
Yep.
Oh, you're not doing?
I never thought
guys.
I never even.
Thomas just gave you his game plan.
I've got him a scheduler, and no, I'm just kidding. I haven't offered any of my staff. They may be trying to get a job with him, and I don't know about it.
What you just said there is so important, though, because if you think about the number of people you've seen over the years, and I've seen them, y'all have seen them, people that, well-intentioned, but whether it's back home, whether it's a statewide elected official, whether it's a member of Congress, whether it's president, who is in your ear matters so much. Who is advising you is so important. For those that, what's the writer that turned into the book, The Lord of the Rings, Christian writer?
Carol Tolkien.
Tolkien. Okay, so there's a scene that I've thought often about that kind of showcases that. There's a scene, I don't know which of the series of the movies, but there's this guy who's been whispering in this king's ear and he's turned ashen gray.
Yeah, it's
Wormwood.
Wormtongue.
Wormtongue, which may be a reference to Screw Tape Letters. There's a famous
Yeah.
Christian book. But anyways, his name's Wormtongue, or whatever his name is. Wormwood, Wormtongue. And he's whispering in this king's ear. And over time, as the movie progresses, he starts turning this ashen gray. And then, the character who is a likened to biblical truth comes walking in and basically says, "You're done." And that influence in that king's ear leaves. And the moment it leaves, his color returns, and there's a great scene where he takes him and kicks him off the steps in front of the palace.
Yeah, I remember that.
So that's I think that's a great word picture.
So
of,
who's your knowledge of who Wormtongue is?
So what I'm saying is for anybody, whether it's a state lawmaker watching this back home, or whether it's a
Okay.
gubernatorial candidate, or it's a member of Congress, all of us, if we don't hire
need
right,
good staff.
it's going to turn you to produce a horrible result.
Maybe that's an archetype or a placeholder for the lobbyists who are trying to get in our ears, right? But I like the Lord of the Rings reference. You get big points for that.
Thanks, man.
I call my congressional pen precious because if you wear it too long, then you become Gollum.
Right.
And when you do wear it, you feel like you got special powers. You just walk through the metal detector, it goes off, and you just keep going around here.
Right.
Because you
You
have
could
that
go
power.
into any building.
You can try any doorknob and walk in, and it's just, oh, sorry, didn't know. Whereas, if you didn't have that pen, you'd be an insurrectionist walking around. So it starts to go to your head when you wear that pen, and Washington, D.C. is Hollywood for ugly people. So we have to wear the pen so that the tourists know we are the ugly people they should be revering.
Right.
And so when they get on Capitol Hill and they see somebody with a pen, they're like, oh, there's one of the
There's one of them.
ugly people that's running the place.
It's also the people that don't like is that there's one of them.
Right, which is another reason not to wear the pen. It's a big
Right.
target. But I made my own precious. So
Yes, let's talk about this one.
They give you a congressional pin at the beginning of every year, and I think I've got 6 or 7 of them now. I've been here that long. At the beginning of every Congress, every 2 years. And this year, I left my pin in the cellophane with my spouse pin. Your spouse gets a precious too, if you remember. And they're both on the placard, and I put them in a frame. If break in case of whatever, break in case of low esteem, right?
Right.
Bust that glass, get that precious out, and put it on. Feel like you're somebody. But I'm trying to get them to put me in charge of designing Precious, the congressional pin. And that's, this was my first take at it. I built this debt badge. I conceived of it over Christmas. And part of it was I knew we would be coming into the majority in January.
Yeah.
And Republicans can be just as bad as Democrats.
We
at
had that
spending money.
today. We were marking up an appropriations bill today, and every amendment that cut spending was
Voted down.
failed.
And we have a Republican majority.
Republican majority. Republicans were voting against amendments that made cuts. Every one. And the only amendment that passed was a Democrat amendment that actually increased an appropriation.
So that is
Yes.
not that's the pretty version. Once you talk about the roofing tin version,
Yeah. So,
that
well,
when you first came up with this and hardwired it, and given your genius, which you are a genius, talk them through how this is the pretty version, but what the rough version looked like.
I'm like that childhood prodigy that ends up flipping burgers at McDonald's, right? Although that's less of a downgrade than coming to Congress. But present company excluded from that pejorative. So the first one I built, I didn't have time to get to a 3D printer and do the CAD model, so I just took some copper roof flashing that was in my basement from when I built the roof on my house, and I bent it up and put a computer inside of it that has Wi-Fi, and I spent 45 hours in my pajamas over Christmas break writing the code, and I would just get up and code for 15 hours and then go to bed and get up and code.
And you did it on what language?
Oh, okay. So some people ask, is this a Raspberry Pi? Is it an Arduino? It's actually an ESP32, which is somewhere between those two microprocessors. And it has just the right amount of computing power, actually too much. So I declocked it. It was 240 megahertz processor. I slowed it down to 10 megahertz so the battery life would be extended.
Yep.
But I had a lot of engineering problems to overcome to build this. But like I had a dream, like a vision, like I'm going to wear this thing, And I didn't want it to be like a giant clock. I didn't want to look like a rapper, And I was like, man, wouldn't it be so cool to have one of these? I've looked online. Nobody makes them. So I'm like, I got to do this. So I just built the first one and wore it for like 2 or 3 months. But somebody is making this. I transferred the IP, and you can find it online. And in the meantime, I'm making you guys one.
Well, awesome.
I'll get to you eventually.
So while you two that have a computer program background were geeking out just a minute ago, for the rest of us that don't have any idea what you were talking about, before somebody gets the impression of you that you are not a rancher, a farmer, why don't you talk about how you've taken this intellect and turned it into free-range grazing chickens?
Well,
I think the viewership would love to.
Let's be clear. My brain is atrophied to the size of a raisin. And when I go home to my farm, though, it grows back to the size of a walnut, and I could still invent some things. So one of the things I invented on my farm is a chicken tractor. This chicken tractor is like a chicken cage with no bottom on it, so the chickens are like happy and they're in the grass and stuff, but you got to go out and move it once a day, and you got to put water in it. And so I built one that's automated. So imagine, if you will, a Roomba that's like 8 feet, on a side, that's got dozens of chickens in it, and it's moving around in my yard. Like right now, today, it's moving in my yard with chickens in it, so that they're never walking in their poop, and they're always eating fresh grass and bugs, and they're happy. And it's got a 4,000 volt wire that it carries with it. And so I designed the electronics for that. And my first model had a battery in it, which the battery went dead after 1 summer of usage. And I'm like, man, this is not green. I try to be as green and sustainable as possible.
You're the greenest member of Congress, probably.
I claim to be, and nobody's tried to fact check me on this because they're afraid I'm right. But I built this with a battery in it, and the battery went dead. So then I realized this was an application for supercapacitors, which are like solid-state batteries. And so the whole thing now is called the Klux capacitor. That's the name of the invention.
Are you going to patent this also?
It's already filed for the patent.
Okay.
Trademarked Klux capacitor.
There are a lot of people who don't understand that reference that weren't born prior to what was the famous flux
1985?
capacitor 1985 that went on the.
Yeah, they were ahead of their time. I think you had to go 88 miles an hour. But my Klux capacitor goes 1 inch every 10 minutes, so it doesn't run over the chickens. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want
It's a chicken juicer. Like if it moves too fast.
Now, hang on. So, all right. So, but you actually ranch. You've got cattle.
Yep.
You actually supply water to your home. You've designed a system to supply water.
I built a
drainage.
pond. I built a pond 200 feet above my house, like in the hills, with a pipe that comes down, so I don't have to have any pumps.
Yep.
And it'll provide 88 psi.
And you unroll round
pretty
bills.
good.
I mean, you actually you're a normal
cut my own hay, feed my cattle in the winter.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of hay rings, so I put out a lot of hay on Sunday night before I come to D.C.
Oh, yeah.
I used to do that as a state lawmaker.
Yeah.
But those hay rings get expensive. You know, what was once $200, I'm telling you what those things are bringing now.
I weld them back together.
I do too.
Take the old ones that are broken, and I
bet.
just keep them
You bet.
until I got like 3 broken ones, and then I can make 2.
Are you a better welder than I am? Because once I go to welding that thin metal, all of a sudden you get holes, and then it fills with water, and then it rusts them out even further. So
It doesn't have to look good on the farm. I could not make a living at it. Just like writing code, I'm not good enough anymore to make a living at writing code, but I can still figure it out.
So you became famous, or some people infamous, during the pandemic. There was you had a conviction, a moral conviction, that given the circumstances, Congress wasn't here, and we were going to pass, not me, but you guys were going to pass a $2 trillion spending bill for COVID with no one there.
Nobody here.
And you tell us about that story, about how you stood up and
So I saw Trump's financial advisor on TV say, well, this isn't really a $2 trillion bill. This is a $6 trillion bill because we're going to give the Fed or Treasury $400 billion, and they can loan that out at 10-1. So it's really another $4 trillion there. So this is a $6 trillion stimulus. And I'm like, holy cow. If you put $6 trillion into the economy and shut down manufacturing, like you're artificially increasing demand while suppressing supply. And I was like, this is going to cause inflation. It's going to cause shortages. This is horrible. It's going to kill our country. It's going to kill the economy. So I got in my car at midnight and drove 8 hours. I slept 1 hour in a truck stop. Because the floor of the house doesn't open up till 9, and I parked
so you were
outside
home
the
because
Capitol.
they'd sent everybody home?
Oh yeah, this was the when I decided to come to DC. It was like the 8th day to slow the spread. Remember, it was only going to be 15 days, and we were in a panic, and they were about to shut down interstates, and most flights were shutting down, and I was worried that they would do a continuity of government thing where once there's a secret. I don't mean to. I know this is not the Alex Jones show or whatever, but
No, this is good. This is
so
getting good.
there are secret contingencies for if poo hits the fan, like as we saw with the speaker thing.
Yeah.
Most people didn't know there was a continuity
backup
of
speaker.
government backup speaker, but they showed us that. Okay, there are other things they haven't showed us, like just as a matter of national security, if our U.S. government ceases to function, the military takes over. And because presumably we're weak and could be attacked if there's no functioning government. So they install sort of a military-led government. And I know for people who are hearing this for the first time, they think I might be crazy, and it's hard to prove because these contingency plans are secret. But I was worried those plans would kick in, and there were already things, if you were paying attention, they were doing. In case Congress couldn't meet, they would just install a military leader. And that's one of the reasons that I drug everybody back here when they were about to shut down the interstates. They were going to wall off New England and shut down all planes. So I got everybody to come here it was on the 11th day of 15 to slow the spread.
Right.
And it was when they were forced to show up. They all hated me.
So you went to the floor and objected when they did unanimous consent or something?
Right. So they had to have a quorum. And what I did is I forced them to have a quorum. And then...
So did you say, what's the motion? Did you say I noticed an absence of a quorum?
Yeah. And, well, I asked for a recorded vote first, and they wouldn't give it to me, so I noticed the absence of a quorum. And at that point, they did something they've never done in the time that I've been in Congress before that, and they've never done since, and that is they pretended like they were counting, but they didn't really count. You can't actually count, but maybe they felt confident there were enough people there, and they said, well, there's a quorum.
Wow.
And so I asked for a recorded vote, and they denied me a recorded vote. They've never, ever done that. And now the Constitution does say that 20% have to stand, I think, in order to force a recorded vote. But I couldn't get 20% of the people who were here to stand up to say we should go on record voting for the biggest spending bill in history.
Right.
Like our appropriations, like even when you do an omnibus, it's not $2 trillion. It's like $1.5 trillion now. And at that time, it would have been 1.2 trillion. But they were going to pass a bill that's twice the size of any omnibus we had done at that point, with nobody on record.
Yeah.
And they actually got away with it. But at least I drugged their butts here and made them come to work. And the thing that saved me was I just said over and over, if truckers are working, if grocery store workers
By
are
the way,
working.
I had in my little heavy equipment business. I was in a semi truck about 2 weeks after because the aggregate community was still moving, and so I actually was sitting in a semi truck about that time.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, and doctors were working, nurses were working.
Yeah.
If they're working, then I thought
can't-
we were supposed to rally in an emergency, and that Congress would, we'd meet inside of some secret mountain if we couldn't meet in public.
Right.
No, they were just like, stay on the couch. It could be a little, dangerous. So, anyways, the president got mad at me.
So that he called you,
He
right?
called me. I'm not going to say everything he said. He screamed at me for about 2 or 3 solid minutes. This was President Trump, not President Biden.
Right.
And then I can tell you this because it's a matter of public record, and his Twitter's been re-enabled. You can go find this. He called me a third-rate grandstander. This is March 27, 2020.
I mean, you were really you were just very courageous, standing up against a very popular president of the United States and doing that.
He had 95% approval rating in my primary voter group, and I was up for election in 8 weeks against a well-funded opponent who used all that material. The president said I should have been, the Kentucky GOP should throw me out of the party.
Wow.
And of course, that was on every mailer and every ad that my opponent did. But I got 81% of the vote in that primary.
Because
for
people
you.
respected your principle of standing up for what you believed in constitutionally, that should not be allowed.
They whether, by the way, that stimulus package, we polled it. 81% of Republicans supported it. And if you try to call it a bailout in the poll, make it sound as bad as possible, it still got 79% of Republicans and almost every Democrat. But they did agree with me that we should go on record. I wanted them to go on record because I knew in 2 years I would be right. And then we could go back and show all the people that put us in this situation. But there's no way to show that today.
I mean, we know that since 2021, the latest data I've seen says that we're at either a 15 or 16% increase of cost of goods and services. 16% in a 2-year period is our total increase. $1,200 more per month that is costing you buying the same goods services. That's $15,000 over the course of a year. So your concern about how that was going to compute and add to what would be future inflation is playing out.
And 16% is an interesting number because 1/12, or which there's 12 months in a year, 1/12 is 8 1/3%. So 16% is 2/12, which is, so you basically, inflation has consumed 2 months out of every year of your salary. You are now working 2 months every year for inflation because of that. And the sugar that made everybody swallow that.
That plus what happened under the Biden administration of an increased additional spending, it was all sum total.
Yeah, let's not miss a chance to blame Democrats too. But
But I mean, truthfully,
right.
it is. It's both. It's
Yes.
both the spending pre-21 and the spending after.
Yeah.
And in sum total, this has been a perfect storm of spending excessivity.
But
By the way, I just made that word up.
excessivity. Well,
It's excessiveness.
yeah, the cheese in the trap. I said this when they passed the bill, was the $1,200 checks. Remember, everybody gets a STEMI check, and then there was a $600 stimulus check and a $1,400. They basically bribed the American people to be happy with the bills they were passing that were going to destroy our economy and create all this inflation. I called it the biggest mistake in human history. Like in front of a TV camera.
Biggest
right
financial
after the
mistake
vote.
in human history.
Yeah.
Okay, so you also get a lot of wrath for voting against, like the NDAA. you voted against that. And do you find things consistent in Congress that that Republicans
The NDAA, by the way, is National Defense Authorization Act.
right that the one thing that's consistent here that you can expect is that people are going to want to Republicans are going to want to spend money on the military, and unfortunately, some Republicans and Democrats can't make any cuts whatsoever.
So they agree that if you let the Democrats spend money on their priorities, the Democrats will let us spend money on our priorities, so it becomes bipartisan increase in spending.
And the taxpayers one getting screwed.
Yeah, although I 6 years ago, roughly, I've been here 11 years, this is about 6 years ago, I quit blaming the people who are here, and I blame the people who voted for them.
Yeah.
Because if you're fooled by a $1,200 check and you still believe the CARES Act was necessary, but it was a pandemic, so we had to destroy our economy. No. If you still believe all that and you're voting that way, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, you're the problem. You're the voter, you're the problem. If you I don't blame the people who are here. I blame the people who sent them here.
But and I would never correct somebody that's a genius, but a subtle pushback on that is when
He just touched me.
when people send people up here that may really be in line with you as a majority, and they send people up here that are good men and women that come up here with right intentions, the whispering in the ear, the poison in the ear can sometimes turn people into K Street lobbyists. They begin to look at their next job placement, and then they basically turn about face on some really good constituents. You got some people up here that I don't think are aligned with the voters that sent them here. So
That's absolutely correct. But when somebody turns, it's the voters' job to take them back out.
Oh, you're right. Every 2 years you get a chance to revisit that. So fair enough.
Maybe you elected the wrong person. Now you get that person out. And some people think term limits will fix that for them. I support term limits. I voted for it in our Judiciary Committee. It did come up for a vote. But it is not the magic elixir that people think it is.
Let me ask this.
Yeah.
Do you think a self-imposed term limit can be? And I'll tell you why.
Those are the worst.
I'm one of them.
Oh,
so
Josh.
I committed to do 8 years, and I'll tell you why. Because
that's good for your family, but not the voter.
Well, but I think it's good because it is an insurance policy I've taken out on myself. I'm taking out an insurance policy on myself to say, after 8 years, I'm still going to be the same person because I see the end, and so the ability to get wrapped around, promotion up here, a title, a chairmanship.
The problem is only good people like you are going to do that. And Nancy Pelosi, the Nancys of the world are not going to do that.
The deep state is just going to wait you out, and the deep Congress is going to wait you out. There's a deep Congress too.
But don't you believe there's a tag team? Don't you believe there's a tag team system to where you do your time and you tag team and you are able to, because you demonstrate to the voter that you have that kind of restraint, then you can have somebody fill your seat that would be just as good as you are, if not better?
Well, you're not going to get, statistically, you guys at Eric Burleson or Josh Burkeen show up about 1 in 10 times. So I'm 90% certain the guy or gal that follows you is going to be worse.
I'm going to try to prove you wrong.
Yeah.
Come 8 years from now,
you don't get to pick that. And now the establishment has 8 years to pick
But you'll have influence. You'll have influence to be able to do an endorsement and say, I see the characteristics of somebody who's willing to put their self-interest second.
Wow. I don't know that we're going to be able to win each other over on this.
Wait. Hold on a second. Almost all the people I endorse lose. And the ones I've endorsed that win, they're the biggest sellouts up here. Like, this plan does not work, the endorsement plan.
The Massie endorsement.
Well, hey, I need to shout out on this there's a particular gentleman in Bartlesville area, Josh, you know who I'm talking to, and when I do town halls, he wants to know, basically, my barometer as to how I'm succeeding is, did you follow Massie's voting? all right, fine. How did Massie vote? That's
You know
so.
what?
Do you have one of those in your
Let me-
district that they want to know? Okay, fine. You've done your
For
justification.
my district, it's Jim Jordan, I think.
That's why he's dressed like Jim Jordan now.
Exactly. Are you kidding me?
He's like, you can't vote like him, at least look like him.
That's right. Okay,
Now,
so
listen, wait.
Go ahead, recover
hold
from
on.
that. Let's hear it, Eric.
Let's talk about a vote I took, and you guys were different than
Okay.
me yesterday.
Oh boy.
And the reason I don't have to look at the roll call to know that you guys voted differently.
Yes.
because you were the only
I was
Republican.
the only Republican.
Yes.
So all I had to look at was the tally, and that was this resolution of support for Israel. And it looked great. The title is great, the notion is great, but when I read it, I think it has flaws. It says all the money we've given them has been righteous, and we need to keep giving them money. I'm paraphrasing, but that's in the resolution. My problem is I didn't vote for the money we gave them, and I don't think it's sustainable fiscally to borrow money from other countries to give to Israel when their debt to GDP is less than our debt to GDP. Okay, so that was one reason. Number two, the resolution tends to expand the conflict. Like, we don't want World War III to come out of Ukraine versus Russia. We also don't want it to come out of the Middle East. And right now it's between Israel and Gaza. And that resolution said, we need to increase sanctions on Iran. So now the resolution implicates Iran. And there may be,
No, Iran but
connections there.
This is Iran. That's Hamas is an extension of Iran, right?
So we're going to bomb Iran? This is my problem. And then I'll give you time for rebuttal. Let me finish
No, it's
the
fine.
rest of it.
That's fine. It's your show.
Because this was, by the way, it was a very popular vote for me to take.
Okay.
I didn't get any blowback on this.
You're different than the squad, though. The Democrats.
Correct. I started out.
You are different. Yours is a constitutional argument.
Yeah.
Theirs is just because there's some idiocy in.
They sympathize with
Right.
with Hamas.
Right. So they come from a different direction. But when I explained my vote, I started out, and maybe I should have done this in your podcast here. I support Israel's right to defend itself, and those attacks are barbaric, and you can never justify that kind of violence on civilians ever. Okay. So I start out with that, but then I go through this, and then sanctions. I've been here 11 years, never voted for a sanction, which makes it easier to vote against this sanction because people are like, you're anti-Semite because you won't sanction Iran. No, I didn't sanction China. I didn't sanction North Korea. I didn't sanction Russia because those sanctions haven't worked. Did Iran and Russia quit selling oil when we put sanctions on their oil? No, it goes into a global market.
Else, yeah.
And if you constrain the supply of legitimate oil, in some ways the price goes up.
Right.
So anyways, I had a lot of reasons for that vote. And the thing is, that vote, it's not that one vote. There's not any one vote that endears you to your constituents or anybody. And there's not one vote that will ruin you up here. But after you've taken hundreds of votes, people kind of get an idea of where you are. It's
You're principled. You're respected for being principled. Somebody asked me, as I told you when I walked in here on a newscast a while ago, about your vote. You're I respect you. You have a constitutional reason for what you do. You're respected, and people look. I'm always going to defend somebody who has a constitutional reason for what they do. As I've shared with you, for me, the biblical admonition, I will bless those who bless Israel, is the paramount thing. It is that scriptural admonition in Genesis that says, I've given this land to you as an everlasting, forever. It's multiple times in the Bible that there's a promise. 2 Chronicles, either 17, 18, 19, 20, Jehoshaphat is reminding God when he's facing a situation, God, you said we're going to have this land forever. So for me, it is a biblical worldview that says, and I believe that history backs this up. Think about when 48, when we were established, we helped establish them. Look at the heyday of prosperity in America that's in tandem with when Israel saw establishment. Look at our economic boom in the 50s, those golden years, farming golden years.
After World War II.
Study ag policy, right? Farming boom in the 50s. Input to output costs, way different. lot production. Look at what happened in tandem with. I would say, I don't think it's by accident. The moment Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, when all these leaders said, "Don't do it; it'll be World War III," he does it. Man, look what happened to our economy. So I believe that there is a blessing on our country the times that we've made the gutsy decision to help Israel. Now, do I agree with you? We need to scrutinize the dollars that are going on, and we should be paying for them by cutting somewhere else. Man, that's where the just in your cause. There's we need to be paying for those dollars, and I absolutely agree with that.
Well, Thomas, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a mentor to me. I think Josh would agree.
Yeah, you're a mentor, and you're hilarious too.
And you're hilarious. You are the funny. I tell people all the time, the funniest member of Congress is Thomas Massie.
I don't know if you're laughing at me or with me.
Can I know we're wrapping up. I want to say this. So during the negotiations with McCarthy, I asked you to come in when the part of
In
the 20.
January.
I asked him to come in because I knew what I didn't know, and I was going to make a bad deal on fiscal restraint. And I knew I had great respect to him from afar, so I'd ask him to come in. He was telling leadership in the room that he was Josh's LA, legislative assistant or legislative director.
That's what I was like.
And
Josh wants me here.
So he was privy to all those conversations with McCarthy, trying to fit those guardrails in. And then they went around the room in front of McCarthy's key staffers, in front of McCarthy's key negotiators. They're like, "Thomas, what are you doing here?" And his gutsy self looked. He said, because they said, "You're pro McCarthy." He said, "I'm just barely McCarthy." He was hilarious. I mean, it was. You're a gutsy sucker, man.
I don't know. Well, I appreciate you guys. Seriously, I'm not just saying this because to pump you guys up, but it really is about 1 in 10 people who run on the Republican platform follow it when they get here. And you guys are in that category, and it's up to the voters to know when they got an Eric Burleson or a Josh Burkeen and to keep sending them back.
Well, thanks, man.
And I'm not going to use any names of our colleagues who are not in your category of following what you campaigned on. But the voters, this summer, the one good thing that we've had under McCarthy, 500 votes on amendments.
That would never have been
seen the light of day.
in order before.
And that was because of those negotiations. We sat in those rooms early in January, and we brought about guardrails that helped us, start changing the status quo.
And that will show a stark difference between the members.
Yeah. And so it's up to the voters. Go look at that. Go see how Eric Burleson and Josh Burkeen voted, and then find out how the other ones
and then compare them against Thomas Massie.
I would say
To
go
my
see who
constituent who's
voted
gonna do
down Jim Jordan.
Yeah.
With that, we want to say thank you to you who watch this podcast. If you like it, please share it with your friends and let them know that this podcast is available on all platforms: Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble. Make sure that you're subscribed. Until next time, thank you for watching Fresh Freedom.